Hey there people, so today I am bringing you my Queen Bee Expert Guide, including normal mode as well. I'll be covering the boss, how to spawn her, strategies, armors, weapons, and preparation. I'll be showing you the fight and I'll be talking about the drops at the end. So this is a detailed guide including the Abeemination summoning item and the Hive Pack Expert drop. It's suitable for Expert but applicable for normal as well. It's just less necessary to be so over-prepared if you're just playing normal. I will explain wherever there are differences between normal and Expert modes or between game versions, and I'll be including timestamps in the video description for each section of the video. So first of all, about the boss. Queen Bee is, of course, a giant bee. She flies around charging at the player, spawning bees and shooting stingers. If you're playing in expert mode, she charges and alternates her attacks more frequently as she takes more damage. She also has more health, does more damage, and has a higher defense, which actually her defense increases as her health gets lower if you're playing in expert mode. And the other thing about expert mode is that the poison effects she inflicts on you last longer, and also you get poison on contact, not just from the stingers. In normal it's just the stingers. In expert it's contact poison as well, and the poison lasts longer in both cases. So defeating the Queen Bee allows the Witch Doctor NPC to spawn. That is this one here. So yes, I've already defeated the Queen Bee in this world. Mine is called, well, I don't even want to try to pronounce that, but the Witch Doctor NPC will spawn after you've defeated the Queen Bee only, and otherwise it's mostly not necessary to defeat the Queen Bee to advance the game, but the loot that she drops is very useful. It is necessary in one case if you want to play as a proper summoner class. In pre-hard mode, you will need to defeat the Queen Bee. Unfortunately, you cannot do that on 3DS because 3DS does not have the bee summoning gear, but on all other platforms you can craft the bee armor and also the hornet staff after you've defeated the Queen Bee. We'll talk about that later. It's also helpful to defeat the Queen Bee for melee players, since the Witch Doctor sells the imbuing station, which allows you to craft flasks, which will basically give powers to your melee weapons. So I can actually, again, I can show you that here. Imbuing station. And you use that to craft flasks. So you can do flasks of fire, and I think there's another one that you can do in pre-hard mode. Most of them are hard mode only, but you know, that'll get you started. So as far as spawning the Queen Bee, she will only spawn in the jungle. She can only be spawned in the jungle and must be defeated there. So you know what? I'm going to go to the jungle and show you what I'm talking about over there. Okay, so I've made my way not just to the jungle, but to the underground jungle, and deep underground you will find hives like this. And the sort of normal default way to spawn the Queen Bee is to kill one of these larvae. This is a larva that lives in the hive. If you kill it, you will summon the Queen Bee. Any tool or weapon, including projectiles, and I believe even your grappling hook, can destroy the larva, so be very careful if you're not prepared to fight her yet. Be very careful if you're setting up an arena and so on. There's normally one of these per hive. Occasionally the hive can be large enough to have two larvae, so then you have to be really careful, because if you kill them both, you will summon two different Queen Bees. It's actually possible to do that as well. So normally this is the sort of default way. Can also summon the Queen Bee by using the Abeemination boss summoning item. So I've got one of those here that I already crafted, but I also want to show you how to craft it, so I brought the materials. On almost all platforms, it's 5 honey blocks, 5 hive blocks, 1 stinger, and 1 bottled honey. So bottled honey, you really just need an empty glass bottle, and then you hop in the honey or near enough to the honey. You can craft your bottled honey. Also, the honey blocks are crafted by mixing honey and water. You can also find them underground in the jungle, anywhere where honey and water meet naturally. So I was able to just find some in the underground jungle. Sometimes you'll come across some honey blocks and you can just mine them out. So again, that's the materials on most platforms, but On 3DS, and only on 3DS as of current versions on all platforms, you will also need, in addition to the 5 honey blocks, 5 hive blocks, 1 stinger, and 1 bottled honey, in addition to those, you'll also need 3 crispy honey blocks and 2 obsidian. And normally, you can see I'm not at a crafting station. On most platforms, you don't have to be at any crafting station. It's crafted, quote unquote, by hand anywhere. On 3DS, you have to do it at a demon or crimson altar, as well as having those additional materials. So there you go. I can use this item, and I can summon the queen bee that way as well. Let's talk about strategies, though. So strategies, the queen bee will line up with the player horizontally and charge at you 3 times. So yeah, I'm also going to prepare my arena while we go here. I brought some stuff to do that. So she'll line up with you horizontally and charge at you 3 times. That's one method of attack. She will also hover overhead, spawning bees. In expert mode, some of those bees will be larger versions, so you'll get to see that in a little bit. And the third one, she will alternately swoop at the player and then hover, firing poisonous stingers. So I kind of mentioned that these are her attack methods earlier, but basically be prepared for that. Another thing about expert mode, as I sort of mentioned, she will attack and alternate her attacks more quickly as her health gets lower if you are in expert mode, and also her defense will actually get higher if you are in expert mode as well. So, ooh, whoops. I guess I'll just go ahead and show you the boss fight. So I brought a few different weapons along. And this is what I mean about being careful. So one thing about her, though, she inflicts poison, but she is not immune to poison. So I brought a blade of grass along. I also brought a thorn chakram, which is another weapon that can inflict the poison debuff. And also you can hit her with Frostburn, you can light her on fire. She is only immune to the confused debuff. So that's why I also brought along a bow. And so you can see I brought some Frostburn arrows because Frostburn is a powerful debuff. And so if I can manage to hit her with enough of those, it's a chance each time that she will be inflicted with that. Also, in terms of accessories and stuff, it's a good idea to have something to whack the bees away with. And yeah, a Bezoar as well. So if you are in expert mode, you can actually use the Shield of Cthulhu when she does this charge thing. And you can basically charge back at her and do some damage to her as well. You will want a Bezoar. That's another accessory that is highly recommended. Because again, she can inflict the poison debuff on you. And you don't want to have that happening, of course. So the Bezoar will negate the poison debuff. There's a variety of weapons you can use, of course. Again, the Blade of Grass, the Thorn Chakram, a good bow with either Jester's arrows or Unholy arrows. Those ones will pierce the bees and hit her as well. Piercing is good in that way, and the Space Gun here as well is good for piercing. Or something that inflicts the debuff. That's why I brought the Frostburn arrows. You can even alternate between the two. And it's a good time to switch to a sword quickly. In terms of armor, I was going to talk about that as well, of course. Different armors that are going to be good, you'll want at least gold or platinum armor. Probably, if you're really good, you could probably get away with silver or tungsten, but gold or platinum is going to be better. Or, of course, any of the specialized pre-hard mode armors are going to be better yet. So that includes, you know, meteorite armor is one of my favorites. That's why I'm using it here. Also, jungle armor, of course. If you're a magic user, you'll want one of those two. Either meteorite or jungle armor. You can also use Necro Armor if you've been to the dungeon first. That's the range set. You can use Molten if you go to the Underworld first. And yeah, I just basically brought kind of a bunch of the weapons that can be useful against her. They're not necessarily all the best weapons. But a good bow, I always like a good bow, because I tend to be a ranged player. If you are a melee player, basically you're going to be looking at, as I mentioned, the Thorn Chakram, the Blade of Grass. Those will inflict the poison on her. Or you can go with basically any of the Underworld weapons that you might get. And if you have been to the Underworld, then you might want to get your Molten Armor if you're a melee player. If you are a magic player, you're going to want to look at things that you're going to want to look at, again, either Jungle Armor or Meteor Armor. You're going to want to consider the Space Gun, especially if you're using the Meteor Armor. Magic Missile can work. Any of the basic magic staffs, which is why I brought Ruby Staff, Gold and Ruby Magic Staff. That'll work as well. Ranged players can consider the Mini Shark, especially in normal mode. Mini Shark is not going to be quite as powerful in expert mode. You might want to consider something a little better, like a revolver, a handgun, or the Phoenix Blaster. Again, if you've been to the dungeon and to hell, in that case the Underworld, that's where you're going to get those. You could get away with the musket just because it's a powerful single shot. But yeah, because her defense is so much higher in expert mode, the Mini Shark is going to be less good of an option. It's not that it's not necessarily a good option, but it's not as good of an option. Another thing as far as strategies, you'll notice I actually have been doing it mostly accidentally, but you can dip in the honey quickly. You'll want to be quick about that, but the honey boosts your regeneration capacity. And so dipping in the honey quickly can be very helpful, actually. And just dip in it and get back out. That gives you this little boost right here, honey. Life regeneration increased. And you'll notice I'm using different strategies at different times a little bit. I obviously didn't get to plan this out quite the way I intended, but yeah, in fact, my buffs ran out there. But yeah, when she brings out the bees, I'm bringing out the sword so that I can swat away those bees. Speaking of which. And then when she switches to particularly the stingers, that's when I'm going with my ranged weapons. The charge is, you know, it's a little up in the air. You'll want to maybe charge back at her. And at this late stage, when she's, you know, alternating her attacks more quickly, that's when those debuffs are going to help you out, because you're going to want to bring down her health that much faster. And again, at the same time, her defense is actually getting higher. So, you know, that's when you want to really nail her as much as possible. So let's finish talking about what I meant to talk about before that. In terms of any other strategies, well, I talked about the armor. I did get that in there. You can also consider Crimson or Shadow armor. So basically, again, gold or platinum or better armor. Jungle or Meteorite, particularly for magic users. Crimson, if you have Crimson in your world and you've defeated the Brain of Cthulhu first. Shadow armor if you have Corruption and have defeated the Eater of Worlds. Necro if you've been to the dungeon and if you're a ranged player particularly. Shadow armor, I just mentioned, is a melee set technically, and molten armor if you've been to the underworld and are a melee player particularly. Molten armor is good. Molten armor has the highest defense, so you might want to consider it anyway if you're having trouble. It's recommended that you have at least 300 health points before you fight the queen bee. And I kind of already talked about most of the weapons. But basically, again, debuffs, you want to hit her with poison or fire or frostburn, something like that. So if you have been to the underworld, almost any of the weapons that you get down there will inflict fire on her. They'll light her on fire, and that's a good option, in addition to the poison options and the frostburn arrows. Other good weapon options are the water bolt. And I mentioned the mini shark is good in normal. It's going to be less good in expert. You can still use it, but it's going to do a lot less damage because of her high defense. Space gun, magic staffs, crimson rod actually is a good option, which I didn't bring with me on this one. I do have that, but that's the one that you get when you smash crimson hearts in the underground crimson. You have a chance to get a crimson rod, and it fires a little cloud and it just rains in one spot. That gives you kind of a passive damage for a while. Another thing that I actually did bring is spiky balls from a goblin army. You can lay these around, and as she charges through, as she passes around in the arena, and you don't have to do your arena in a hive, I'll get to that, that's up to you. But yeah, as she passes through, you know, if you've got your crimson rod cloud raining on her, spiky balls, she's going to hit those as well. And poison knives actually is one that I wanted to show, and other throwing weapons can work too. You can use regular throwing knives, you can use regular shurikens. Those will be okay. They're not going to be great, but you can actually upgrade throwing knives to poison knives by combining a stack of 50 throwing knives with some vicious powder or vile powder, depending if you're in Crimson or Corruption world. So this is a Crimson world in this case, so it's vicious powder from vicious mushrooms. If you're in a Corruption world, it's vile powder from vile mushrooms. You can also buy these from the Dryad. She'll normally sell, I think, only the one that's applicable to your world, but you can craft these from the mushrooms directly as well. So this was actually something I was going to show you, and I'll go ahead and I'll demonstrate this all again. I'll fight her one more time just to show you some of the differences as well. To show you, hopefully I can take her down a little quicker the second time and not be in such a panic. As far as accessories, I mentioned some of those as well. Any accessories that improve damage, defense, or mobility basically are going to help. So I have both some boots. These are Spectre boots in this case. They will help me jump. They give me the rocket boot jump as well as the speed of running. But any of those, you know, running boots and or rocket boots combination will do well. Anything that gives you the double jump, the cloud in the bottle, tsunami in a bottle, sandstorm in a bottle, all of those in a bottle things that give you the double jump, and you can combine those with a balloon as well. If you have a shiny red balloon, that'll let you jump higher, and mine, this is actually an unusual one, but basically you can combine those and, you know, a lucky horseshoe if you have it. That part doesn't really matter, but you want the extra jump height will help you dodge when she's charging sideways particularly. Another thing, if you are on one of the updated platforms, a shark tooth necklace is always good against all the pre-hard mode bosses. It effectively lowers their defense. It's not exactly what they actually do, but and I mentioned the Bezoar. The Bezoar gives you the immunity to poison, and she does inflict poison, especially in Expert. That's going to be important because, again, the poison that she inflicts lasts longer, and she'll hit you directly with it. So those are all things that you'll want to consider. And again, if you are an expert, the Shield of Cthulhu, because that gives you the dash, which will damage her back, essentially, when she's charging at you. Now, the wiki suggested that you can charge her and hit her and avoid damage. I was getting damaged when I was charging at her. She was getting damaged as well. I don't know if that's an effective trade-off, but, you know, it's an option anyway. I might actually try swapping that out. The Band of Regeneration isn't great, but I think it'll help a little, just as an alternative. And this is just something I like to do. These are not effective if they're in the social slot, but it's just a storage spot for me. Of course, potions can help as well. Basic potions for me, you know, obviously you're going to want health potions. You can also use bottled honey to as in place of a health potion. So if you don't have health potion, just bring some empty bottles with you if you happen to be coming to the hive, fill them up with honey, and that is effectively a health potion. It gives you 80 health. Although if you can get the full proper healing potion in place of a lesser healing potion, the lesser is only 50, so honey is better than a lesser healing potion, but not as good as a full proper healing potion. So there you go. But also Iron Skin, Regeneration, Swiftness, those are fairly basic potions that are pretty easy to make. Some food for the well-fed buff. I have a bowl of soup. Well-fed is that much more important in expert mode. If you are using a bow and arrow, archery potions, good idea as well. And there's a ton of other ones. These are just the ones, these are the basic ones. Queen Bee is not the hardest boss, you know. She's a relatively easy boss, so I didn't go overboard here. But there are a lot of other potions that you can make if you are having trouble. Check out my potions guide. It gives you, one of the first sections is buff potions. So there are a ton of buff potions you can make by getting the right fish, actually. Things like the endurance potion, and the Wrath potion, and so on. There's a bunch of them, and so if you need an edge, there are a bunch of extra potions which will give you that edge, and check out my potions guide for those. Yeah, let's talk about the arena for 1 second here. Okay, so as always, mobility is the key. So long platforms. This is the most basic thing you can do. Basically, break into the hive. Put some platforms. You're probably going to want them just above the honey. Honey will slow you down. It does help with that bonus healing, and you can actually see it dripping off when that's in effect. But you probably just want a platform just above the honey level. You can even dig down if, you know, depending what size the hive that you break into is. This is not a big one, but as far as I'm concerned, this is enough room. You don't need like a huge amount. You know, clear the area, but be careful for that larva. As I showed you there, it's very easy to accidentally hit the larva. So, you know, I did it myself, and what's funny is that's probably the first time I've actually accidentally hit the larva. I was always very careful and always missed it, but there you go, it's that easy. So be careful when you're creating your arena. If you decide to do it in the hive, you do not have to do it in the hive. It does need to be in the jungle. So you can pick a spot anywhere in the jungle, underground, above ground, it doesn't matter. But if you are breaking into a hive and killing a larva, you know what? The hive is a very sensible place. As you can see, other enemies are not coming in here. And in the jungle, you may have found out by now, enemies will be attacking you a lot. So the hive is a very good option. It's a very good place to make your arena. You don't have to do it here, but you certainly can. And having the honey to help with your regeneration is a big boost as well. But basically you want platforms. You can make stairs if you want. I often do, as you've seen in my other guides, but I didn't bother this time. Main thing is actually vertical mobility and just basic walking back and forth as far as the queen bee, because the thing is that she charges you from the side. So being able to like hop out of the way and drop out of the way, that's a big thing. And otherwise she's just gonna hover above you most of the time, and you'll just need to shoot up at her. So, you know, that's why, you know, the line of platforms right above the honey line is going to be really helpful. And I did actually bring a bunch of things that I did not get a chance to use that time. So campfire is going to help with your regeneration as well. An ammo box if you are using ranged weapons like the bow that I'm using, or a gun. Then an ammo box is good. You get that from the traveling merchant. If you are using melee weapons, I actually don't have one, but it would have been useful because I am using some melee as well. Then a sharpening station, if you happen to have one, is going to be helpful as well. Now, you don't have to bring the ammo box and the sharpening station here. You just right click or whatever your secondary button is to activate that boost, and that boost will be active for a while. It's 9 minutes. I'm trying to recall, unfortunately, these might be updated only, the ammo box and sharpening station and stuff. So I don't know if that's going to be available for all of you. I did not make notes on that one for this, but those are definitely helpful, and they give you a boost. This is ammo conservation with the ammo box. The sharpening station boosts your attack a bit. And also I did bring a heart lantern and a star in a bottle. These give like a radius effect, so it's probably best to put these in the middle, but I don't want to like spend a bunch of time putting some blocks and stuff. They will not hang from platforms, so Star in a Bottle is more for magic users, and Heart Lantern is for everyone to again help boost your regeneration a bit. And there's the boost for those as well. Let's see, is the range big enough? Yeah, I can actually get that all the way across here. So it's a pretty good range. So if you're in a small hive, at least, it should, even the sides, it's good enough. So those will all help you out as well. You know what, let's talk about the drops. You know, there's not a lot to the arena. I could throw in some ropes. I don't think that's going to be too useful. It's mostly platforms and stairs, and just having, you know, the extra boosts is basically how that's going to work. So you know what, let's just go ahead and talk about the drops that she leaves when you defeat her, since I've already done that once now. She always drops 5 to 15 bottled honey. Again, you can use that for a health potion. You can also use 1 or 2 of those if you want to craft an Abeemination and fight her again. And she will also drop 16 to 26 beeswax every time, except on 3DS. There is no beeswax on 3DX or 3DS, and all the other platforms, though, you will get the beeswax, and you can use that to craft a bunch of stuff, including the bee armor and the hornet staff, which are basically your starting point for getting to be a proper summoner in Terraria. You can also, on the updated platforms, you can use the beeswax to craft more bee nades. She has a 75% chance to drop between 10 and 29 bee nades. She always drops either the bee gun, the beekeeper sword, or on the updated platforms only the bee's knees, which is a bow. So you will always get any of the platforms, you will get the bee gun or the beekeeper, or if you're on one of the updated platforms, the third one you can get is the bee's knees bow, and she'll always drop one of those. So you may have to fight her a bunch of times if you want one specifically. She also has a 1 in 3 chance to drop the Hive Wand, and a 1 in 9 chance for each piece of the Bee Vanity outfit. So that's a 1 in 3 chance roughly that you'll get one of the pieces, 1 in 9 to get each one. Also a 1 in 3 chance to drop the Honeycomb accessory, which basically releases bees when you're damaged. A 1 in 15 chance to drop the Nectar to summon the Baby Hornet pet. 1 in 20 chance to get the Honey Goggles, which give you the bee mount. On the updated platforms, it's a 1 in 20 chance, and pre-update, it's only 1%, 1 in 100. As far as I know, the wiki is like here and there on this. As far as I know, that does not exist on 3DS. The wiki in one place says it does, and one place says it doesn't. I don't think the 3DS actually has any mounts, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's a 1 in 100 chance before the update anyway, so not likely. But yeah, since the update is 1 in 20, that's 5%, is much better. You have a 1 in 10 chance to get the Queen Bee trophy, and a 1 in 7 chance to get the Queen Bee mask. In expert mode, she always drops the treasure bag, which always contains the Hive Pack item. So I got my treasure bag here. I got a bunch of stuff from that. And in fact, I don't think, it's funny, some of the bosses, you get some stuff outside of the treasure bag and some stuff inside of the treasure bag. I got all of the items in the treasure bag, which is interesting. So I got the bee pants from the vanity set. I can throw those on, why not? I did get some bee nades. I got some beeswax. I got the honeycomb accessory, and I got the beekeeper in this case, which is the sword. I got the queen bee mask. Sure, I can throw that on. This is not my regular character, so I didn't have my regular vanity outfit. The Hive Pack increases the strength of friendly bees. So what that actually does, when you equip the Hive Pack, roughly half of player-created bees, in other words, bees launched because of the beekeeper, because of the honeycomb, because of the bee gun, because of the bee nades, and so on. Anything that allows you to get bees that fight for you, about half of those will be spawned as larger, faster, more powerful versions. So they are bigger, they move faster, and they're about 15% more powerful. And so that's actually a very, very useful accessory in expert mode. That will help you against Skeletron, who is much harder in expert mode, which is why I did this guide before doing Skeletron, since I am doing an expert series. Personally, I would fight the Queen Bee before Skeletron in Expert, at least. Not really necessary in normal. Queen Bee is definitely easier in Expert compared to Skeletron, and also against the Wall of Flesh. Easiest way to defeat the Wall of Flesh is with the bees. Hive Pack is going to power up your bees. Enough said. That's basically all you need to know. So let's go ahead, and at this point, I'm going to fight her again. Actually, let me see though. Yeah, I want to try out the poison knives. I'm just going to get those selected first. I'm going to get my buffs going here. I'm going to get that going here. And yeah, let's do this again. Maybe I should even do it 2 more times, because why not, right? So I'm going to poison her with some stabby knives. And the thing about these is, of course, you can recover them too. Oh, that's interesting. She almost always hovers overhead, but I don't know, she got a little confused that time. So you can't even use throwing weapons, and even like in pre-hard mode you can play as the throwing class effectively, at least on the updated platforms. So, you know, you can do that. It actually does a reasonable amount of damage with something like the poison knives, or you can get the bone glove and throw bones at her if you've been to the dungeon. I'm kind of like doing this as if I hadn't been to the dungeon, which again technically I have, but I'm gonna do Skeletron next. So I should have an easier time against her this time, because I've got kind of everything in place. It's mostly regenerative. I'll be able to keep my health higher because of Campfire, the Heart Lantern, the Honey. Also being, you know, just generally a little calmer and paying attention. You know what, I'm going to try, because actually most of the recommendations are for Jester's arrows, or unholy arrows, piercing arrows basically, in place of the Frostburn. I am a big fan of Frostburn arrows in pre-hard mode, personally, because of that debuff, but let's see. This will help a lot if she starts launching bees at me. You know what though? Yeah, Jester's arrows are awesome, but they're situational. And the bees move reasonably fast. You're supposed to basically aim at her back, because that's where the bees come from, if you are going to use piercing arrows. Of course, that's only when she's actually launching bees. Yeah, it works if you aim it right, basically. But you do lose the debuff, so I don't know. It's a little here, a little there. If you can switch your arrows quickly, that would probably be ideal. But yeah, I tend to play ranged, and sorry, a little control escape moment there. I tend to play ranged, and so, you know, I tend to stick to that strategy. Queen Bee is a good boss to be playing, you know, ranged or magic as, or against. It's going to be harder for melee players, but I think the Thorn Chakram, the Blade of Grass, of course, you know, if you're fighting her really late in pre-hard mode, you could always potentially get the Knight's Edge as well. So there are options for melee players. You can do something like this. Whack the bees as they come out. And again, having you know, the debuffs and stuff, something that's going to light her on fire or poison her, that's going to help a lot. Funny thing is, I'm using ranged weapons and melee weapons with a magic armor set. It's probably the only reason that the space gun has been effective for me at all, because I am using meteor armor, which not only gives me boost to The fact that I don't need to use mana to fire this gun, but also because it does increase the damage as well. That is the set bonus of Meteor Armor, to increase all magic damage, which makes the space gun very viable. If you're using a melee set, your melee weapons will be more powerful. If you're using a ranged set, well, there is only one ranged set in pre-hard mode, which is the Necro set. So if you've been to the dungeon first, you can use the Necro set as a ranged player, and that's going to help, certainly. Save you some ammo and increase your damage. Keep an eye on your buffs and stuff. But yeah, even though I like the Meteor Armor, I am a ranged player at hard. It matters a lot less in pre-hard mode. If you're in hard mode, you're going to want to kind of stick to whatever your proper class setup is. But in pre-hard mode, you can get away with mixing it up a lot more. Be prepared to switch weapons frequently against the Queen Bee. Okay, this will be funny if I actually lose the second time when I was supposed to be more prepared. But you can see that debuff working its magic a bit. Oh, it's finally run out. This is kind of the dangerous part in expert mode. Right near the end, when her defense is up, she's attacking more quickly. She's switching up her attacks. But that's, again, why I like that debuff. Much as I can hit her with these Frostburn arrows, you know, that would be my approach, or the poison. There we go. By the skin of my teeth. You know what, I think that's probably enough, so thanks for watching. Hope you liked the video. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.